Today I want to discuss discipline, respect, corporal punishment and national service. These are subjects that often divide opinion because they touch on how we raise children, how we educate people, how we maintain standards in society, and ultimately what kind of culture we want to create for future generations. Many people argue that society has become too relaxed, that respect for authority has declined, discipline has weakened, and personal responsibility is not valued as highly as it once was. Others would argue the exact opposite. They believe society has evolved, become more understanding, more compassionate, and moved away from outdated methods that may have caused more harm than good. So where is the truth? Could discipline be stricter in schools and at home? Has corporal punishment been removed for good reason? Or has something important been lost along the way? Are respect and accountability declining? Or are we simply changing what those words mean in a modern world? We'll also discuss national service, a topic that continues to generate debate. Would it help build discipline, resilience, responsibility and social cohesion, or would it be an unnecessary restriction on individual freedom? As always, this podcast is not about telling you what to think. It's about exploring different perspectives, weighing up the pros and cons, and encouraging independent thought. So let's get into it. Has society become too relaxed, or have we simply evolved? And what role should discipline, respect, accountability and service play in the world we live in today?
What if everything you think you know about reality is wrong? What if the glitches, the mysteries, and the unanswered questions are clues from conspiracies and the paranormal to science, consciousness, and the possibility we're living in a simulation? This is the One Opinion in 8 billion podcasts. Every week, we dive into the biggest mysteries of our world. Subscribe now and be a part of the discussion. Question everything. Nothing is off limits.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of One Opinion in 8 billion. So today, as I've discussed, I'm going to be talking about discipline, respect, corporal punishment, national service, and how all these things could sort of intertwine and link from previous times to modern times, and if they've evolved as everything should in modern society, but if along the way things have been manipulated or overreached, and now we're in a bit of a decline in terms of, well, mainly discipline, because you can't have respect without discipline, and things like that. Before I start this episode, I just wanted to just to say a quick talk on my last episode about the Second Amendment in America, which wasn't aimed directly at America. It was mainly because, as a British citizen, even seeing one mass murder that could have been potentially avoided through some sort of limitations on an outdated right, even though the right, I believe, is still 100% effective. I'm all for the right, whether it's my business or not is irrelevant. But I think every country should have the right to be able to bear arms and protect what's theirs and themselves. The problem I have with it, which I was trying to do in the podcast and try and find a middle ground and a possible solution for a compromise to kind of please both sides, even if it's a little bit, was the extremities of the weapons that you have in a private residence for protection solely. You know, forget farmers, forget hunters, forget sports people. They're completely different, and it would need more looking into from what I originally said. But it's a starting base. The fact of the matter is, having more than a pistol, or at least 2 pistols, whatever, in your household just for private protection from anybody trying to break in, rob you, or anything like that, I think it's more than sufficient. You know, when the Constitution rights were written between 250 and 300 years ago, there was probably about, well, a handful of guns or firearms readily available. The ammunition wasn't like it is today. The population wasn't as it is today. Law enforcement, crime, none of that was like it is today. So even though some of those have got worse and would further the need for said protection under the Second Amendment, um, I still don't think that you need an arsenal of weaponry, an arsenal of ammunition, because on that one instance, if you've got a troubled teen or a lodger or whatever it might be, somebody with mental health problems that have maybe gone unchecked up to then because of their age and they're just classed as a moody teenager or whatever it might be, for just one of those to have access to that amount of ammunition and that amount of arms and go to a school or a shopping mall or, God forbid, a hospital or something else and cause mass murder because someone's told them to do it, or they've been deluded from a game or a film or manipulation from the news or any input or whatever it might be. If one life is saved because of slight limitations, then to me that's worth it. I've been given a lot of backlash, mainly on Facebook. Most of it's quite amusing in terms of the sense that a large percent of the people, Americans, have not clearly watched my podcast. Now, they might think, well, I don't want to watch this load of crap, whatever. That's fine. They're telling me that I'm British and I have no involvement in the Second Amendment. Well, a lot of what happens in America filters through to the UK. So if I want to say something, I will. And I do. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to break through these taboo subjects that nobody really wants to talk about because they're frightened of backlash. Well, I'm not frightened of backlash. I will speak my mind because I am an advocate for humanity and I'm trying my best to try and find some solutions to some very big problems that are complex. The Americans hold very dearly the constitutional rights and I'm all for it. But on the flip side, most of the haters and the people that are attacking me are you're always going to get two sides. You go very for or very against, and then you're going to get a load in the middle, which I personally think would be the majority. But those either end, both for and against, whatever the situation is, you're going to get a lot of arrogant, ignorant, and egotistical people that don't want to talk, don't want to debate, don't want to have a civil conversation. They just want to argue. And it's purely because of their own arrogance and ignorance that they believe that they are right and that they're not prepared to even listen to another's point of view before they even open their mouth and react. If you were to look at all the comments, you'll see me answer the questions hundreds of times, literally. And then they come back with like one sentence that I've said, but nothing that I'd said before or after said sentence, just to solidify their argument, and it holds no water. So I talk about pros and cons in anything and everything that I do, and try and weigh it up logically. It doesn't mean I'm right. It just means it's me trying to take a step in a direction. It doesn't mean it's going to become law. It doesn't mean it's going to be what I've said is the word of whatever. It just means it's a potential starting point for people to stop, think, and hopefully some good will come of it for all humanity. It's not just America. There's other countries that sit very much in between the American rights and British laws, which are the strictest. America's probably got the least strictest in terms of the actual availability to hold and carry and purchase. But there are other countries, you've got Australia and you've got other countries that are less, how would I call it? So poorer countries, or, where firearms is relaxed, basically. So, it's not just focused on America, but when I see whether it's once every 10 years, once every year, once in my lifetime at 40, to see a school shot up that could have been avoided, any life is worth saving. So I'm going to sidetrack that one. No, none of the people that I needed to actually hear that will probably listen to it, but we'll move on. So, and this very much comes in play from the crime aspect of firearms, but not solely. But I can only really base this much on the UK, but I do think that it is probably a worldwide problem. I don't think that any problems in any specific country are isolated just to that country. I think that when society evolves locally, that naturally evolves internationally. But this is going to be solely based on my perspective of the UK and where I've seen a natural decline just in my time. And everything that is happening in modern society is happening a lot quicker than it was back in the day. So, it's gone from being changes maybe every 20, 30 years or more as you go further back in time. Now we're getting every decade or every couple of years. It's getting, that's the same with advancements in technology and everything else. It's happening very quickly. We're going through eras that used to be maybe centuries. Every decade there's a new era you could label. We've gone from since I've been born, we've gone from the modern era, the technological era, the computer era, the AI era, the future era, the robotics and AI era. It's just, if you want to look at the specifics and you look back at history, we've gone through just in my lifetime about 4 or 5 potential eras. But legislation, regulations, rights, and things like that need to adapt. They don't need to necessarily be changed or completely ripped away, but they do need to be in keeping with the times. So, anyway, in my book and a lot of things that I say, all based around social norms. So, what we feel is appropriate. To give you an example, I really struggled as a young adult to, if somebody did something or didn't do something that I felt you should or shouldn't do, I took it personally, and I used to be really, I'd never express it, but I'd be very upset or unhappy with that person, whether it was a colleague, a stranger, whatever. Things like opening doors, saying please and thank you, stuff like that. But as I got older and I'd like to think a little bit wiser, more knowledgeable, more experiences, and everything like that, which formulate our opinions, I came to the realization and understanding that who says I'm right in what I do? That's how I was brought up, and those morals and principles I hold dearly. But who's to say that they're right? They might be wrong. So the people that I'm potentially in my mind judging might be judging me for doing the opposite to what they were taught. So, it made me take a huge step back, which is why I very much try to deal in logic, pros and cons, weigh them up. And the same as a voting system, the majority, you have to go with the logic. So it took me a long time to understand that. But once I had, I was a lot more at peace. You've got people, for instance, from different cultures, say maybe Asia, that there's the communication barrier and a complete cultural difference, cultural traditions, all different. But when they're speaking English to you, they might miss out words, and just missing out that one word, which I will talk about in a future podcast in miscommunication, just missing that one word could have an adverse effect on the way it's either portrayed or and perceived. So like if an Asian person was saying, give me money, he might not say please, or she might not say please, or they might miss another word out or something, and it comes across more abrupt and aggressive than most likely what they actually intended. But I'll talk about the miscommunication on I think it's either the next podcast or the one after that. But it just goes to show that we never really know when we react to things unless we stop and think about the bigger picture and the situation. We can all be hotheads, and we can all react instantly and blow things out of proportion. That can depend on the day that we've had, our principles that we hold dearly, and morals. But stop, think, and you might have a row with somebody, but they might have had a really crap day. It's not excusing it, but rather than go right back at them, maybe just say, look, whoa, I'm just trying to have a whatever, and you've completely gone over the top. Are you okay? I know that that's unlikely to happen, and I know that people are going to watch and think, but what the world needs to become a better place, and the only way for that to happen is, it's not that I'm right, it's just that some of the things that I say 100% need looking into. Doesn't necessarily mean what I say as a solution is the correct one, but it definitely needs to be looked at. So I keep diversing. So respect and discipline. I think they are on the exact same level. If you don't have discipline, and that can be whether it's physical or verbally, whatever it might be, if you haven't got discipline, you're not going to have respect for people or authority or anything. And that's the point of today's podcast. So, some of the things that I've noticed. So, when I was younger, if I was naughty, which I would have said is probably about the same for the majority of my friends of similar age, if we were mouthing at mum, dad, whatever, whilst they were cooking or something like that, and they had a wooden spoon in their hand, you'd get a clack with it. Now, that is obviously completely forbidden today in the UK. Corporal punishment in both schools, even authorities such as police and stuff like that, it's all gone. Now it's got to the point that it's that severe that I think a lot of parents are quite scared to even shout or raise their voice to their children, especially in public. Because the social norm now has become that that's the wrong thing to do, because that's what we've been told is the wrong thing to do. So it becomes the norm, the habit, the tradition. But, like the most common thing that I used to get hit with when I was naughty, and I can quite openly admit now that I probably did deserve some sort of punishment, was a dog lead. It wasn't like we got the dog lead today, it was just a fabric one, and I'd get whipped, clacked with it around the side of the legs or the bum or whatever it was. And that worked really effectively until I was probably, in my middle to back end of high school, where if that ever happened, I'd just be the typical teenager and be like, and that soon died off because it didn't work anymore. Now, this is not saying that all kids need to be hit, and it's not saying that kids need to be hit with an item. That's where the evolution works. What I find disturbing and distressing is where I feel that where discipline's got a little bit lost in between, is the main reason for, especially for parents to discipline physically their children, has been eradicated, was when the laws came in because of children that were abused, not sexually, but physically by their parents. Now, you were never allowed to go and batter your children to the point that they couldn't sit down, or bruised, or broke bones, or hospitalised, or any of that. That's assault, regardless of, the relationship or anything like that, or abuse, or, that's always been the case. But what's happened is, with children that have died and families that have fought for them, or parents where a childminder or another relative that was looking after them has killed the child, and the advocates that have fought for these rights, it hasn't changed anything other than stop some children that do need physical punishment, that are now essentially out of control, that have no respect for anyone, their parents, police, teachers. I've heard and seen horror stories. And I think the youngest I've ever tell me to F off, because they've crossed the road. I beat the horn and they've stuck their fingers up at me and told me to off. Was about eight or nine. That's ridiculous. I mean, I'm from a period where you respected your elders, but on the same flip side to that, respect is earned, not rightly given. So if I was to give you an example, had an elderly person talk to me completely out of line, completely out of context, no fuel for it or anything like that, I would tell them that they were rude and well, not basically going to get anywhere in this conversation. But generally, I believe that if somebody is an elder to you, that they don't have authority in whatever over you, they don't automatically require respect, but it's just you should. Well, no, I suppose it is respect. I mean, you should, if it's simple things like if you're on a bus and there's an elderly person there, get up, let them sit down. They are going to be more frail. They're going to be more thingy on their legs. That to me that's respect. I see all these things on Facebook and other social medias of a pregnant woman, a child, and an old woman, and the caption says, "Which one would you give your seat up for?" Well, if you weigh up the pros and cons, they've all got validity, or whatever the word is, how you pronounce it, to have your seats. But for me, again, I weigh up the pros and cons. So the first person I'm going to look and assess is the old person, because they're the most risk. The second person is going to be the pregnant girl, woman, and the third person is going to be the child, because the child's the most fittest. Yeah, depending on their age, they might be a bit, unsteady on their feet and stuff like that. But they should have more ability to be able to grip, the poles or whatever it is on the bus. But my logic would still be the old person. If the pregnant person was in labour, then it'd be the pregnant person, because there's a more immediate emergency. And I might be wrong in that calculation, and everyone will have a different principle and morals and to how they rephrase those or relabel those. But that's me. But that's what that I'm trying to use it as the point of, that's what I mean by respect. Opening doors for someone. I actually opened a door I was at a car services on a motorway, and it's the same as always. When you're in a high populated area, if you open one door, the likelihood is you're going to be standing there for a few minutes, because everyone's gonna thank you, and that's fine. It makes me laugh inside. I'm chuckling to myself. But there was this one woman that I was going out, and she was just far enough away still that I didn't want to open it for her to come first. But as I went out, I held the door open, and she turned to me in the most, if looks could kill, I can do it myself. I couldn't even respond. I was probably in my early 30s at the time, and she was probably older than me. She was probably, maybe in her early 40s, late 40s. And I was that took back by it. I didn't even have chance to be able to respond, and just went on my merry way. But that's how things have changed, and where some things have changed for the worse. Now, you're never gonna be getting it perfect. You're never gonna get everyone happy. It's never gonna happen. But I reckon with most things, you could probably get 80% either very understanding to why it is or whatever, or happy. I think you're always going to get 20%, just not having none of it. And that is potentially down to the fact of how we've evolved, that there is just haters out there that just want to argue. They like arguing. They like disagreeing. They like to think that they're right. And, especially when they get another couple of people that are backing them or saying the similar things to them. But the problem is, it's like I said in another one, where one of my shorts I did, that we will complain like that about food, products, whatever it is, service. But as soon as they do what you consider in your morals and principles above average, above what you expect, often doesn't get said to either the person, the management, establishment, or like a review. None of that's it's done a lot less. And it's the same principle as when these people, these haters, it's more often than not haters that comment more and argue more. Those that say maybe agree with me, or at least where I'm coming from, don't want to get involved in confrontation, so they'll not even bother writing. That's why it always looks like you're being attacked by multiple people. It doesn't mean that they're right because there's loads of them attacking you. It means that more people attack and are confrontational, especially when they're arrogant and ignorant, think that theirs is the what they think and what they say is God. And then they go off thinking, well, I had about 10, 12 people backing me up, so I must be right. And it just fuels the fire. So it is quite amusing. But going back to the corporal punishment side of things, so these laws that have been fought for because of abused children, which I'm all for, obviously, has took away any physical punishment of children. Now, when I'm talking about physical punishment, I'm not talking about what happened with me, because discipline is always going to get diluted over time, because when my mum was a child, she would have got the belt, she would have got the cane at school, and she didn't like any of that. So when she did her discipline, it was less than that. Not much less, but less. I'd be grounded, I'd be locked in my room. God forbid any of that happened today. Oh my God. But the fact of the matter is that too much has been taken away. So when I'm talking about hitting or disciplining physically children, for me, if they are a very small child and they do something wrong and they keep repeatedly doing it after verbal commands, smiling and laughing, so they know that they're doing wrong, tap on the wrist or the hand, call it what you will. Tap. You haven't hurt them, you haven't scarred them, you haven't bruised them, you haven't hospitalized them, you haven't killed them, and everything else negative. They may cry. It's not because they're hurt. It's not because they're in pain. It's because, very similar to a parent when you're older telling you that they're disappointed is actually worse than probably getting belted. They're upset that they've made you cross. That's what they're crying for. They're not crying because you've hurt them. As they get a bit older, into their older toddler years, and when they start going to reception and primary school, if they do things that are, they know right and wrong by this point, if they do things and push the limits and keep doing it, and verbal's not working, taking things away from them's not working, and the only option you have left to enforce your authority on that child, your child, tap on the bum. Again, you haven't scarred them. You haven't left a mark. You haven't made them so they can't sit down. They're not hospitalized. Again, you have not hurt them. You have upset them because they know that you are unhappy, disappointed, cross, mad, any of the above with them. That's why they're crying, if they do cry. That's what I feel in the younger years is the starting point for effective discipline. And that is what's been lost. And I do believe, and I'd argue this with anyone, I'd hear what others have to say though, and that's my opinion and stance on said corporal punishment. Schools, it's a difficult one. Schools are changed when I was younger. I don't believe the cane. I mean, anybody that's not a parent physically disciplining your child today is probably going to be a bit of a push to try and sort. However, there is a potential solution which I have actually come up with since releasing my book. So it would most likely go in the next volume if I do one, which is, I say about all people in public positions, authoritarian positions, should have body cameras. Now, this is the new bit. I think teachers should have them as well. It's purely for their protection. The amount of times, both when I was in school, so this wasn't limited to just now, this is just when I was in school, which was 25 odd years ago, you would get a child stand in front of a teacher saying, "And what? What are you going to do?" So, that is completely disrespectful. Now, if they were wearing a body camera and they wanted to raise their voice at them, I, as a parent, would be more than happy with that. And if it can be justified on a camera as to why they've done that, that for me is completely justified, because it might make that child go, oh, yeah, because they know that they can't do that, or they're not allowed to do that. Some do it because they lose their temper, understandably so. But because that child is under the delusion that they can't, which is the key word there, they're not supposed to, but it doesn't mean they can't. So they're under a bit of a false protection bubble there. Because if you catch somebody on the wrong day, say the wrong thing, everyone's got a limit. So, but it's things like that that I'm trying to, once children get to teenagers, they are a lot harder to instill discipline and or respect. So without having it at an early age where they understand that basically there's going to be consequences if you do wrong repeatedly, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And if it continues, well, I don't know what the end result is there, but you can only do what you can do within the laws. But I think parents not being able to basically minimalistic, physically punish their children is wrong. And the irony with this is the laws that have stopped this from happening doesn't stop the criminals and the abusers from doing what they did before, because they weren't allowed to do it before the law came in. So in my eyes, all that's actually happened is if these abusers get caught and when these incidents still occur, they just maybe get found guilty or prosecuted for a different crime title. He has done nothing other than diminish the rest of society. There are families that, I've spoke about before, that you can have two children, both the same parents in the same household, same upbringing, one turn out good, one turn out bad. And that doesn't matter whether it's from a bad family or a good family. It can happen either. Yes, statistics do show that the worse of upbringing you have, the more poverty-stricken, the worse treatment from parents do have an adverse effect on later in life in terms of criminality, mental health, suicide, and a number of other things. But it's not all. I have to be very clear on that. It's not all. Because if you have a bad start in life, it stands to reason, it's common sense that it's not probably going to go great for you throughout it unless you change it. So me and my brother were completely separate, but we had the same upbringing. We had no different upbringing, but we are almost opposites in terms of the way we are with personality. So if you get, if you're from an affluent family and you've got a child misbehaving, they are going to have that as a negative reflection on their parental upbringing, which is absurd. Well, maybe it's absurd, maybe not always, but if they do every other task, ground them. For anyone that doesn't know what that means in a foreign country, it means telling them that they can't leave the house. So it's a bit like, they're imprisoned in the house. They go to school and come home. That's it. They're grounded from doing the things that they enjoy, going out, seeing their friends, whatever it is, even though that's minimal these days. So that doesn't really work. So the next best thing in modern society is to take their PlayStation, Xbox, whatever game console they play with, their iPads, their internet, their mobile phone. And these are effective tools, but they don't work for all. This is the same as everything in life. One rule doesn't work for all of them, or for everyone. So I just think that it needs to be a little bit of a tweak back in that legislation. I have got a very, very close friend of mine who is very highly educated and academic, works with the education system, has a couple of degrees, a master's, all surrounding sort of psychology and being able to assess things like potential signs of ADHD and autism and things like that, dyslexia, whatever it is. And she thoroughly disagrees with me on this point. And it's good to have people, especially that you're so close with, because you've got to have things in common to be friends, right? The same as any other relationship. If you don't have things in common and don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, then it's probably not going to last very long. But on this particular instance, and probably many others that I'll talk about in the future, but on this particular one, which she is very educated in, very skilled in, very experienced in, we thoroughly argue because she is very much, because she's academic, the same as like a scientist. They're very much on percentages and facts and reports and data and things like that. And she basically says to me, and it's the only one that I can't really argue, so the conversation kind of comes to a standstill. And she says to me every time, there's a proven side effect, whether it's little, major, whatever, that have adverse effects in mental health, in their psychology, from the physical punishment. And I understand that. And very similar to having any emotional trauma as you're growing up and things like that, like I've already stated, I do get that. And I see where she's coming from. But my argument still is it's not all. And I mean, I haven't actually looked specifically. I'm sure she'll probably, if she ever listens to this podcast, she'll probably very much text me and tell me. But I don't know what the percentage is to the data that we've collected or any studies that have been done actually says. But then what I would want to know on that data is how bad the physical punishment was, and if them as a person felt that it was necessary to keep them in line. So there's always going to be a for and against. I've got my own against on this particular subject, but my pros outweigh the negatives and the cons. I feel that in general, society has gone further downhill because of victims of abuse and their families fighting for stricter physical punishment laws, which haven't done anything other than prevent those that can dish out physical punishment marginally and minimally, rather than battering them, punching them, slapping them, whatever it is, whatever horror stories are out there, because you've never been able to abuse your children, like I said earlier. So all it's done is take away those kids that could be brought into line at an early age. It's gone. So now we've got a much less respect for authority, police. Yes, there has been a lot of a decline in police. I've done a short on that as well. But they are still authorised and they are still the police. So unless it is witnessed or can be proven, or if they blatantly step out of line with you, like punching you, kicking you, whatever, whilst you're handcuffed and detained, which I have also witnessed and gone to court for on behalf of somebody that wasn't a friend, it was just someone I knew because I was a doorman and he was a regular punter. We are now friends, but it was this particular instance that made us become close. And this gentleman was handcuffed, first of all, for absolutely no reason whatsoever. There was about 6 police officers that come straight over to us, grabbed him. Well, I mean, they didn't even open their mouths to him. They just grabbed him. And at the time, in viewpoint of everyone, he was doing nothing wrong. And he didn't take kindly to that, which didn't make things any better. But I can understand why he didn't react well. Anyway, he had about 3 or 4 police officers getting on top of him. He was handcuffed. He was secure on the floor still with 3 or 4 weighted males on top of him, so he's not going anywhere. And the female copper that originally went over to him grabbed him, as far as I can tell, without just reason, without saying his name or we're here from this incident or this date because of what you did. That would have all been fine. But no. But irrelevant, because he kind of shrugged her off, which is what kicked it off. She's then felt belittled. So what's she done with her? I don't know if they are still toe cap actually, but it's irrelevant. She's got boots on and she's booted him in the head in front of me and 3 other door staff. And we all testified on his behalf. And what happened? Well, he didn't get prosecuted, rightly so, because his infringement was only because of her actions. And then the rest obviously followed suit as it would. She's then kicked him in the head. Now, whilst he's detained under police protection, and what did she get? She was at the time, because anybody with a taser is deemed as an armed officer. They're just not, a physical firearm officer. But we've spoke about the tasers anyway. But this was about 12, 15 years ago. Tasers were only recently being rolled out, and they were definitely not as common as they are now. A lot of officers have them now, and I'm all for it. It's a step in the right direction if used correctly. And she was an armed officer, so she had the taser. And as far as I'm aware, she was essentially reprimanded. It's easy to say that you've told someone off, but she was reprimanded, and we didn't see her in the town centre being a doorman. I see a lot of the police. I know a lot of the police. We didn't see her for a long time, a good 3 to 6 months, in the centre on like Saturday nights, Friday nights when this occurred. So whether or not they've gone, we're going to have to do something, we understand that the job's hard and that he deserved it. Whatever happened behind closed doors, they probably said, let's just let the dust settle and we'll put you out of the area or out of the central area. So we didn't see her for a few months, whether it was 3 to 6, I'm not sure. And every time I did see her, when it was like there was a local football match on, which is on the outskirts of the stadium, and during the day, when I seen her, because I was security there as well sometimes, she no longer had her taser. So I don't know if that was an addition or if it's not required at football, but I've seen them at football before, so I don't know on that one. But the point I'm trying to make is that she was minimalistically told off, essentially. Now, if that had been me and 2 of my mates holding some bloke down or woman down, or it makes no odds on gender, and somebody come over, or one of my friends come over and booted them in the head, that's a prison sentence. Now, I've mentioned in my in one of my shorts, I think it was the police one, where I think that they should be held higher. Whatever crime they're found guilty of, if that ever and when that ever happens, I think they should be given maybe triple the sentence. They're in a place of extreme authority with extreme powers, and if they are abused, there's the one that I met. I don't know if I did mention it, but there was a gentleman who's just been sentenced now, a police officer that sexually assaulted several females. He completely abused the trust and loyalties of the police and the powers, and has set the police reputation back by years. And he was sentenced to, barely anything, and he's sexually assaulted, several women, whilst they believe that they're being all fair, a police officer. It's wrong. It's complete abuse of power, and it needs to be made an example of. So that really infuriated me. But we see it all the time, which is why a lot of respect for the police has gone downhill. But in general, they are still the police, regardless. So 90% of the time, regardless of what you think of them, there should still be a respect barrier. You know, even when we're watching, like, America's a great example. We're watching Cops or one of the crime shows, whatever, a pursuit. You know, it doesn't matter what what the reason for the arrest is, but I've seen it in a lot of cases in murders. I've seen it in where they took the police on a massive speed run and caused carnage. And the perpetrators, the bad people in this case, are still calling the police sir. That's brilliant. I mean, if you even, that just goes to show that even, some of the worst criminals in America still respect the police. That's massive. And that's one thing that we just don't have in the UK. And the Americans and police in general, it's not isolated to the UK. The backlash of reputation is worldwide. Especially with modern technology and cameras readily on phones. The amount of, police misconduct or whatever that's captured is vastly more than it used to be. And that's in America as well. I'm not saying the American police force are any better or worse than the UK, but the perpetrators, even after they've just had a dog biting them and they're bleeding or they've been tased, they're still saying sir when they're responding to the police officer. And that's irrelevant of age. That's irrelevant of whether these perpetrators are in their 50s or 60s and the officers maybe 30. They are still calling them sir, and that is respectful, and we've lost that massively. So that's the discipline and respect, my viewpoints, that I think they hold, the hand in hand, and without discipline, I don't, of some sort, even if you take the physical side of it out of it, take the physical off the table, discipline in general is lapsed. I hear some children, I mean, don't get me wrong, as I got a bit older, I spoke to my my mum and stuff awfully, and I massively regret it now that she's gone. And if either of my kids had ever spoke to me like I did to my parents at some time, at any age, they probably would have got a clout. I'm not going to lie. Because it's the biggest disrespect. The parents have brought you into the world. They've given you everything. They've done their best for you in general. And you shouldn't be saying, shouldn't be swearing at them. You shouldn't be telling them when they've said no to you, you wish they were dead, or you wish you had different parents, or call them names, like horrible names like you're fat or ugly, or whatever it is. You shouldn't be doing any of that, and that's wrong. And I did do that, and within reason. And it's a massive, massive regret of mine. Probably one of my biggest shames in life is having done that. And now I can't even turn around to my mum and tell her how sorry I was about that, and that how much it actually cuts me up, and how much adversely it's actually made me a better person, because I now know that is massively wrong, disrespectful to hell, etc., etc. But principles of discipline has gone downhill, and it's got worse and worse and worse every year that goes by, every decade that goes by. I feel that I like to think that I'm strict but fair. I'm sure that there's a misbalance there sometimes, but generally I'd like to think that I'm strict but fair. My kids could obviously answer that, but I would, if I enforced something, if I said you were grounded, or if I said your phone's gone or whatever, I would enforce that. If I'd said your phone's gone for a week, if you do that again, and they do it again, the phone's gone for a week, 100%. And I think a lot of people give in. My mum, when I was younger, if I was grounded, so had to stay in the house, essentially, I'd do a reading that much. They should eventually just go out. And I think that happens now as well with phones and tablets and TV and whatever it is that you've confiscated, which will really hurt them. They do your head in that much because they haven't got a clue what to do with themselves that they, well, you end up just go and get your tablet and get out of sight. But they've won. And then they use that every time because they've clicked that if they annoy or pester or push, they'll get what they're given. Whereas I don't have that. I am, once you've done it, that's it, done. So, and that's not by in any shape, way, or form saying that I'm perfect because I am certainly everything far from perfect. But again, in the moment and impulses are very different to when you stop and think and reflect on things. And that's, everything I say to you, everyone that ever listens or reads a book or whatever, I'm saying those exact things to me. And a lot of them are because they're things that I might have done in the past that I'm ashamed of or that I feel is completely wrong. And it's not necessarily my apology, but it's my way of trying to make sure that I try and help others learn from the mistakes that I've made. I've said before, many a times in different ways, different manners, different places, that mistakes are only mistakes if repeated. A mistake is a learning curve. Yes, you want to try and avoid them where you can, but inevitably we're all going to make mistakes at some point in our life. But learning from those mistakes, adjusting and not repeating is the only time it's actually a mistake. Just a little wordplay for me. So we're going to be wrapping up now. I'm going to get to my last point, which is national service. Now, the last time national service was in the UK was during World War II because we needed the people, right? And they were young, and it was a massive loss of life, and it was, of the time, it was a necessity. To have a national service now would put us more towards the communist and dictatorship side of things, because you're being told to do something rather than it being a collective decision. However, I feel that there may be, again, another middle ground where it's not so much of being told, it's an option. You've got two very different people in life. You've got those that are academics and those that are more practical, hands-on, in whatever job the job is. And I believe that there's a distinction between those two types of people. And it could also help the discipline side of things because the laws are a little bit different. Not much, but there's massive consequences. So, national service. So, I believe that when you finish school, you should be given the option. You either go to further education, sixth form, A-levels, college, whatever it might be, only for those 2 years, 16 to 18. So, I'm not talking about university. I'm talking purely immediately after leaving school to the age of 18. So you either go into your further education or you have to do national service. Why do I think this is a good idea? Because you learn things in the service that you will not learn in modern day society, both at home and in the real world. You learn respect and discipline, key and foremost in this particular conversation. But you also learn fundamental skills like being able to iron, being able to feed yourself, survival skills. Basically, all things that I really think should be taught in school anyway, if I'm brutally honest. In the military, you're given the amount of knowledge that you're given for situations you wouldn't even contemplate. You've got the knowledge and the skills over the training and the vastness of experience, and continually doing and stuff like that, that will just help you in everyday life. Now, that's not to suggest that all people that are more practical or hands-on rather than psychological, mentally academic, need discipline. That's not what I'm saying. Because I know a lot of people are going to go, oh my God, but it appears that there is a clear divide, that those that are more academic rooted seem to have a more simplified path. They've had to put the hard work in. It's not saying that it's been simple to get there, but they go from education to degree to a good job, good money, family, house, 2.2 kids, and generally live happy after with all the hardness in between. The practical ones that are more hands-on, some of them have to go to college and get like tradespeople, but those are also, and this is very stereotypical, but like I say, it's not. The way that I perceive things is on the majority of what I've witnessed. So this could be completely outweighed or even, but it's just my perception that the people that are more tradesy or hands-on in their job roles rather than office management, business, that there is a distinction that they're a lot of less discipline on that side. It's not to say all by any means. And again, on both sides, you're going to get those that are horrific because both sides can also do bad. But I just find that there is a bit of a distinction between those routes. So, if you then are the academic side and you pick the further education, generally your discipline or respect level should be marginally better than this side. However, if this was brought into effect, you are going to get the clever ones that are like, well, I don't want to go in the military, so I'm going to opt for college. But this also has a stipulation where you have to pass college. So, and this is basically in the sense that you can't just not show up and then fail and then say it's because the teachers were bad at their teaching or whatever. So this is purely that you would have to have a high level of attendance without valid reason. You would have to pass or be close and resit if you showed and demonstrated that you'd put that effort in and that you had generally struggled for whatever reason. So it wouldn't be as easy as going, oh, I don't want to do military service, so I'm going to do that. Now, you won't see war unless we have an all-out scale world war, which could potentially happen soon. But even if it did happen, this would happen anyway. So I'd rather have my children or me, or anyone be prepared if that ever was to occur, rather than be called up and in 6 weeks of weapons training, you're sent wherever. So you would serve from around 16 to 18, and you wouldn't see war in that time or anything like that. You wouldn't see any harm or anything like that. It would be literally just learning the basics of being a soldier. And like I said, the fundamental thing, map reading, the list is endless. And it'll be loads of fun. Yeah, if you're disrespectful or a little bit less undisciplined, then you are probably going to have a bit more of a crappier time. But that will get knocked out of you, and you'll eventually, you'll do sports. And the best bit is, if you're like a tradesperson, like, you want to do something like plumbing or electrician or whatever like that, but you want to do the military as well, you can do it in the military. So for me, it's a win-win. National service, where you'll see no initial harm unless an all-scale war breaks out, which would be the case anyway, because at the moment our service personnel is very minimal compared to previous times. And I would argue that at this current present time, we are in very uncertain times where, I hope that I'm overstretching, but all-scale and actual world war, which is every nation that can, could potentially go to war at any time. With the some of the people that are in power and some of their ways of using force as a deterrent, rather than doing things in another manner. It's not as out there as it maybe could have been 20 years, 30 years ago. So it is a concern. But if we've got the younger uprising generation, given the choice, they're not being told they have to go in the military. They're being told that they have an option, for the benefit of our society, to either further their education and follow whatever path leads, or you can go in the military, where you can do trades as well if you're one that would rather go in the military anyway. And you can do qualifications in the military in those 2 years. There's nothing stopping you doing that. You're learning the best of both. And that after, when you turn 18, that you can either continue on, or you come back to civilian life. A better person, more experienced, more educated, more qualified, just more experienced in general, a more rounded person. And I feel that may be another solution, or possible solution, for making society back to being a lot more respectful than it is today, back to maybe when it was probably my grandparents' kind of era. So maybe, anything sort of pre-war, World War II, and then obviously post-World War II, things have slowly but sped up to where we are now. So I'd love to know what you guys think. I am going to wrap it up there today because I don't want to blag you, and I've talked for way too long than I wanted to on this podcast. But you know that I'm a yapper, and I like to try and get everything out there, and my full opinion across, which even after I finish doing my podcast, I always think, oh, we should have said that, because that would have made, my argument or my point more solid. But like I said, there is no rights or wrongs. I'm by no means perfect. This is just me as an advocate for all humans, regardless of where you're born, your skin colour, your religion, your sexual orientation, or anything. I'm an advocate for all humans. We're all one species, and I know we can do better. We've proved we can be better. So we need to try and look at solutions and ways of being able to bring that back together in an ever-growing population. So thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.
Thanks for watching the One Opinion in 8 Billion podcast. The truth is rarely simple, but the questions are always worth asking. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and join the conversation, because the biggest questions in life deserve to be explored.